On the south coast of England is Hampshire, a county of stark contrasts from busy cities and commuter towns to idyllic rural settlements on this gateway to the West Country. But what are its prettiest towns? To establish this, I visited them all personally, and my conclusions are presented to you in this top 10 list. As per the rules of this series, cities are included for consideration, which in this case adds 3 contenders to the pool. However, villages are not, as there are just too many of them. So without further ado, let's get straight to it. Number 10. We start with a town just up the road from Southampton in the picturesque Test Valley, Romsey. This is a place with all the hallmarks of a well-kept historic market town, a chaotic street layout, a market square overlooked by a statue of local significance, in this case of Barney Gumbel's favourite British Prime Minister Lord Palmerston, and a parish church that was once part of an abbey dating back to the 10th century. And for a town of just under 15,000 residents, it even has the luxury of a railway station connected to 2 neighbouring cities. So if you're travelling between Southampton and Salisbury on a day single or day return, you can break your journey free of charge here, just for example. Why National Rail and the train operators don't shout this from the rooftops, I've no idea. Number 9. Next we head to the coast, or an inlet of the English Channel at least, and the town of Emsworth. Considering the size of Hampshire's coastline, it's got a surprisingly small number of seaside towns, and smaller still since April 1974, when Bournemouth and Christchurch were transferred to Dorset for obscure bureaucratic reasons. Not to mention 1890, when the Isle of Wight became a county independent of Hampshire. Nevertheless, Emsworth showcases its quasi-seaside location with sprawling panoramic views of Chichester Harbour from this minimalistic causeway known as the Promenade. As for the town centre, it exudes a certain rustic appeal that you wouldn't find in the aforementioned Bournemouth, for instance, making up somewhat for a lack of a beach. Number 8. Straddled between the big towns of Basingstoke and Andover is a town bearing no resemblance at all to either, Whitchurch. The southern fringe of the North Wessex Downs provides the backdrop to this small historic town. It was here during the 19th and 20th centuries that the crystal clear River Test powered Whitchurch Silk Mill, Britain's oldest working silk mill no less. The town centre's unusual layout consists of a mini roundabout at its core, spawning off 5 side streets. A wander along said streets will reveal a much deeper history than 19th century silk, however, with a few genuine Tudor buildings with jettied upper floors giving testimony to Whitchurch's heritage. Number 7. And now to the famed New Forest National Park, or its western fringe at least, and the town of Fordingbridge. The town's name is a reference to the crossing point of the River Avon just downstream from Salisbury, not to be confused with the River Avon in Bristol and Bath, or the other River Avon in Stratford-upon-Avon. Well, you get the idea. One of Fordingbridge's claims to fame comes from 1794, when notorious smuggler Captain Diamond made his way here from Guernsey en route to Salisbury, having smuggled a hoard of tea, rum and coffee across the English Channel. Whilst he was divvying out the smuggled tea to his accomplices in the town centre, customs soldiers arrived on the scene, and a bloody battle ensued. Now, I don't condone violence, but I can certainly appreciate the guy's passion for a good cup of tea. Number 6. Now to a town roughly equidistant between all 3 cities of Hampshire, and yet one of the county's most isolated towns at the same time, Bishop's Waltham. The town's prefix harks back to the 10th century, when King Edward the Elder granted the land here to Denewulf, Bishop of Winchester. Subsequent bishops of Winchester would reside in Bishop's Waltham Palace from the 12th century, and even beyond the Reformation, up until its ultimate destruction at the hands of Oliver Cromwell in the 1640s. The town centre is almost as well presented as the palace would have been in its heyday, featuring an immaculate high street and an even more stunning approach to the parish church of St. Peter, even if the church itself is strangely well hidden behind some nearby trees. Number 5. Returning to the Test Valley, featured in our number 10 entry, we now come to the smallest town in Hampshire, and in fact one of the smallest towns in Britain, Stockbridge. With a parish population of just under 600, it'll be of little surprise that the town centre of Stockbridge comprises almost entirely of one street. But for travellers between London and the West Country in the Georgian era, this wide high street welcomed many stagecoaches, likely more so than the namesake stagecoach buses of today, with a paltry 3 daily buses to and from Winchester, excluding Sundays. But it's the River Test, along with its numerous smaller river channels, providing one of the town's main attractions, namely as one of the country's leading destinations for fly fishing, which reels in the angling tourists, so to speak, during the peak of the season. Number 4. Next up is a town in the very heart of the South Downs National Park, Petersfield. The town centre radiates around a market square overlooked by a rare statue of King William III in ancient Roman garb, as was the style of statues from the 18th century for some reason, and just off to its side is the 12th century church dedicated to, appropriately enough, St. Peter. A cluster of 15th and 16th century cottages feature on Sheep Street, a street whose name alludes to the town's medieval wool trade when it was a producer of a light cloth known as Hampshire kersey. And then there's Petersfield Heath, where a walk along the pond is bound to clear your mind of any lingering fog. Perhaps the biggest surprise of Petersfield, though, is that it's served by a railway station, which gets you to London Waterloo in just over an hour, thus flying in the face of the theory posited by the beaching apologists out there that a train station alone is supposedly enough to turn any idyllic town into drab urban sprawl. Number 3. Our first podium spot goes to the town considered to be the capital of watercress, New Alresford. Now, don't be fooled by the name. There's hardly anything new about New Alresford, which in the context of aesthetics is very much a compliment, but it was a brand new settlement way back in the 12th century when Godfrey de Lucy, Bishop of Winchester, oversaw its construction just south of the village of Old Alresford. The street layout, with its inverted T-shape, is a prime example of a medieval burgage plot, although, with the exception of the 14th century tower of the Church of St. John the Baptist, the extant architecture is about as Georgian as it comes. The reason for this is simple enough. A great fire broke out here in 1689, leading to a subsequent building spree that transformed it into a town that even Daniel Defoe would feel right at home in to this day, although how he'd feel about Broad Street being used as a car park is anybody's guess. Number 2. For our runner-up spot, we head back to the fringes of the New Forest, this time to its southern end, and the port town of Lymington. Here's another example of Hampshire's unconventional coastline, what with most of it comprising of the Solent Strait, which separates the mainland from the Isle of Wight. In Lymington's case, its geographic location at the mouth of the unoriginally named River Lymington, where it meets the Solent, allows it to serve as the ferry port to the charming town of Yarmouth on the island's western corner, a town sure to feature on the Isle of Wight episode of this series, incidentally. In addition to a picture-perfect quayside lined with numerous yachts and rowboats, Lymington also boasts one of Hampshire's liveliest markets against the backdrop of its Georgian high street. In short, a southeastern town with a certain southwestern feel to it. Number 1. So for me, the top spot has to go to Hampshire's county town, the original capital of England, Winchester. Covering its history would take far too long here, but in short, This was the city that didn't appear as an entry in the Domesday Book of 1086 because it was the Domesday Book of 1086, aka the Book of Winchester. In other words, the erstwhile biggest city in England, and indeed its predecessor Wessex, even though the population today is a modest 48,000 or so. That being the case, property here isn't cheap, certainly compared to neighbouring Basingstoke, despite the latter being closer to London. But whereas London has dubious looking skyscrapers, Winchester has medieval city gates, the 13th century Great Hall featuring King Arthur's Round Table, and of course, Winchester Cathedral, one of the finest cathedrals in the country. Some would say the finest, even despite its lack of a spire, a subject for much debate in itself right there. But one thing's for sure, Winchester is a city that's never forgotten its roots, from when the Saxons discovered the Roman fort of Venta Belgarum and Alfred the Great fortified it from the Viking threat in the 9th century, and who still watches over it to this very day with sword aloft, albeit in bronze. May we all be blessed with so much as an ounce of his courage, leadership, and parenthood. Thus concludes this list of my picks for top 10 prettiest towns and cities in Hampshire. Do you agree or disagree? By all means, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to catch up with other counties covered in the series so far, check out the link on the screen now. Thanks for watching and have a great day.